In a small, quiet village nestled at the edge of a thick, ancient forest, the days passed peacefully. The people tended their gardens, mended their homes, and gathered in the square to share stories by the fire each night. The village was simple but full of warmth. However, just beyond the safety of their homes, the dark, towering trees of the enchanted forest stretched as far as the eye could see, whispering with secrets the villagers dared not uncover. The villagers spoke of the forest in hushed tones only when necessary. They told stories of strange creatures hidden deep within the woods, creatures that could fly without wings, beasts that glowed in the night, and spirits that could change the weather with a snap of their fingers. For as long as anyone could remember, no one had ventured past the first line of trees. Legends warned of travelers who had entered and were never seen again, lost to the forest's magic. Yet there was one girl in the village who didn't feel the same fear. Ella, with her soft brown hair tied back in a ribbon, had always been different. She spent her days gazing at the trees, imagining what lay beyond the village's edge. While other children played in the fields, Ella sat on the hillside, watching the way the sun filtered through the dense canopy, making the leaves shimmer as though they were alive. She had always been curious, far more curious than the other villagers thought was wise. While they whispered of danger, Ella dreamed of adventure. She imagined walking through the forest, meeting the creatures that others feared. She pictured herself speaking to fairies, discovering hidden groves, and finding out the truth behind the stories her grandmother once told her. Her grandmother had been the only person who didn't speak of the forest with fear. Before she passed away, she used to tell Ella tales of Valoria, a lost kingdom hidden somewhere within the forest's heart. According to her stories, Valoria had been a place of great beauty and magic, where the trees sang and the rivers sparkled like jewels. But one day, the kingdom had disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the forest and forgotten by time. The villagers had stopped talking about it long ago, choosing instead to let the kingdom fade from memory, replaced by warnings of the dangers that lay beyond. Ella never forgot the stories. She carried them with her like a precious secret, a reminder that the forest might hold more than just danger. It might hold wonder. But no one in the village understood. Her parents warned her not to let her mind wander too far. "The forest is not for us," they would say, their voices heavy with worry. But Ella felt differently. She couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was calling to her, waiting for her to discover something the others had missed. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky and painted the trees with orange light, Ella sat by the edge of the forest once more. The wind brushed her cheeks, carrying the faintest scent of pine and earth. In the distance, she heard the faint call of an owl, its low hoot echoing through the trees. Her heart quickened, as if the sound were meant for her alone. "I wonder what's really in there," she whispered to herself, her eyes tracing the dark line of trees. In that moment, she made a quiet promise. Someday, when the time was right, she would step into that forest, not out of fear, but out of the deep, burning curiosity that filled her heart. It was a chilly afternoon when Ella found herself rummaging through the dusty attic of her family's cottage. She had been sent up to find an old quilt, but her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts, as always, drifted to the forest and the tales her grandmother once told her. The attic, cluttered with old trunks and forgotten heirlooms, seemed the perfect place to let her imagination wander. As the soft light filtered through the small window, casting long shadows over the piles of worn-out books and cracked picture frames, Ella's fingers grazed the edge of a wooden chest tucked away in the far corner. It was an old thing, carved with delicate swirls and patterns that time had weathered but not erased. She knelt down, her heart quickening with a strange sense of anticipation, and gently lifted the lid. Inside was a jumble of old belongings, faded letters, delicate scarves, and a bundle of parchments tied together with a fraying ribbon. The quilt she had come for was folded neatly at the bottom, but Ella's eyes were drawn to the bundle of parchment. Her hands moved instinctively, as if guided by something unseen, and she untied the ribbon with careful fingers. The top sheet was brittle, yellowed with age, but as she unfolded it, she saw lines and markings sketched with precision. It was a map, an old hand-drawn map. Ella's breath caught in her throat. At the center, beneath an intricate set of lines and symbols, was a single word written in bold letters: Valoria. She stared at the name for what felt like hours, her heart pounding in her chest. The Lost Kingdom. Her grandmother's stories came flooding back in vivid detail, and for a moment it felt as if the air around her shifted, the weight of the attic replaced by something much larger. The map seemed to pulse in her hands, alive with secrets that had waited years to be uncovered. Ella's fingers traced the lines carefully. The path began just outside the village at the edge of the forest, winding its way through places she had never heard of. Markings she couldn't quite understand dotted the corners of the map, strange symbols that looked both familiar and foreign at once. But it was clear. The path led deep into the forest, far beyond where anyone in the village had dared to go. Valoria, she whispered, the word tasting both strange and familiar on her tongue. Could it be real? The stories she had always believed to be nothing more than fairy tales. Could they have been true all along? A strong pull began to take hold of her, a tug in her chest that seemed to draw her toward the map, as if it were calling out to her. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice in her head, telling her once again about the beauty of Valoria, the shimmering rivers, the golden trees, the magic that pulsed through the land. Her heart raced with a new kind of excitement, one she hadn't felt before. The attic around her faded into the background, the dust and the cold forgotten. All she could focus on was the map, the path it revealed, and the promise of something greater just beyond the trees. The enchanted forest, which had always seemed so distant, now felt like the only place she needed to go. A part of her, deep down, had always known this moment would come. The map had found her, as if it had been waiting for her to discover it all along. But she knew what this meant. Venturing into the forest meant going against everything the villagers believed. It meant breaking the rules, facing the unknown, and stepping into a world of magic and danger. Ella hesitated for a moment, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the map. She thought of her parents, of the warnings they had given her, of the fear that lived in their voices whenever the forest was mentioned. She thought of the other villagers who would surely try to stop her if they knew. But none of it mattered now. The pull was too strong, the call too clear. Ella stood up, clutching the map to her chest. She had no choice but to follow it. The kingdom of Valoria was out there, waiting for her to uncover its secrets, and she would be the one to find it. Stepping back from the chest, she folded the map carefully and slipped it into her pocket. As she turned to leave the attic, her mind was already racing with plans. Tomorrow she would begin her journey. She would step into the enchanted forest, guided by the map and the stories her grandmother had told her. And maybe, just maybe, she would find the lost kingdom that had been hidden for so long. The adventure had already begun, and Ella could feel the thrill of it rising in her veins. The next morning, Ella rose before the sun, slipping quietly out of her home. The village still slept, its streets silent and empty. She clutched the map tightly in her hand, the worn parchment a constant reminder of what lay ahead. With a deep breath, she made her way to the edge of the forest, where the trees loomed like sentinels, tall and shadowy in the early light. The air grew cooler as she approached, the scent of pine and damp earth filling her senses. She hesitated for only a moment at the tree line. Then with a determined step, she crossed into the forest. The world seemed to shift around her, the village fading into the background as the dense trees closed in. The enchanted forest, forbidden for so long, now felt like a living presence, watching her every move. The forest was still at first, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath her boots. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in patches, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Every now and then she thought she saw movement out of the corner of her eye, glimpses of small flickering shapes darting between the trees. But they always vanished before she could get a clear look. As the hours passed, Ella followed the path marked on the map, her eyes scanning for landmarks and signs. Yet, despite the map's detail, the forest was an endless maze of towering trees and thick undergrowth. She began to wonder if she'd made a mistake, if she'd gone too far already. Doubt crept in. Just as she was about to pause and rethink her route, a voice echoed from above, soft yet commanding. Not many dare to walk this far. Ella froze, her heart pounding. She looked up and saw a pair of large, glowing yellow eyes peering down at her from a branch high above. Perched in the shadows was the largest owl she had ever seen. His feathers were a rich mottled brown, and his wings seemed to stretch wider than she was tall. His beak gleamed in the dim light as he tilted his head, studying her with an unsettling intensity. Who are you?" Ella asked, stepping back instinctively. Her voice shook, though she tried to sound brave. The owl's head swiveled slightly as though amused by her question. "I am Orlo, guardian of the woods," he replied, his deep voice rumbling through the forest. "I watch over these trees and all who dare enter them, and I have watched you, Ella, from the moment you crossed the threshold." She blinked, startled that he knew her name. "How do you know me?" Orlo spread his wings slightly, the movement slow and deliberate. "I know all who seek the kingdom of Valoria," he said. "It is my duty to protect it, just as it is my duty to warn those who come seeking its secrets." Ella's breath caught in her throat. He knew about Valoria. Somehow this great owl understood more than the villagers ever had. She stepped forward, her nerves slowly giving way to curiosity. "I need to find Valoria," she said. "I found the map. I know it's out there." Orlo's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the air around them seemed to thicken with the weight of something unseen. "Many have sought Valoria before you," he said, his voice quieter now, as if weighed down by memory. "None have returned." The words hung heavy between them. Ella felt a shiver run down her spine, but she held her ground. "Why?" she asked. "Why haven't they come back?" Orlo ruffled his feathers as if uncomfortable with the question. "The forest is no ordinary place," he explained. "It is filled with magic, yes, but also dangers you cannot imagine. Creatures that guard the secrets of Valoria with their lives. Spirits that have wandered for centuries, lost and forgotten. The path you seek is treacherous, Ella, and even if you find it, the kingdom is not as it once was." Ella's heart sank, but she clenched her fists, determined not to turn back. "I don't care how dangerous it is," she said firmly. "Valoria needs to be found. If it's lost, I'll help bring it back." At that, Orlo's gaze softened, and he cocked his head as if considering her words. "You would risk everything? For a kingdom you've only heard stories of?" "Yes," Ella answered without hesitation. "It's more than just stories. My grandmother, she believed in it, and now I believe in it too. If there's even a chance that Valoria can be saved, I have to try." Orlo was silent for a long moment, his wings shifting slightly as he weighed her sincerity. Finally, he gave a low, thoughtful hoot. "Very well," he said at last. "If you are truly willing to face the dangers ahead, then I will guide you." Ella's eyes widened. "You will?" "Yes," he said, "but on one condition. You must promise to help restore the kingdom once it is found. Valoria is not just a forgotten place, it is a kingdom in need of redemption. The forest will not allow you to find it unless your heart is pure and your intentions are noble." "I promise," Ella said earnestly. "I'll do whatever it takes." Orlo nodded, satisfied. He flapped his massive wings and glided down from the branch, landing gracefully beside her. His presence felt both protective and powerful, a comforting ally in this strange place. "Then let us begin," Orlo said, his voice steady. "Follow me closely and do not stray from the path. The journey will be long, and the forest will test your resolve. But together we may just find what you seek." With that, Orlo spread his wings and lifted off, hovering just ahead of Ella. She took a deep breath and followed him deeper into the forest, the map tucked safely in her pocket. The trees seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing darker, but Ella's fear was fading now. She had a guide, and the promise of Valoria ahead. The forest thickened as Ella and Orlo ventured deeper into its heart. The air grew cooler, the light dimmer, and the trees seemed to stretch taller, their gnarled branches weaving together like a canopy of old secrets. The path was no longer clear, winding through undergrowth and strange glowing plants that pulsed faintly as they passed. Though Ella was sure they had been walking for hours, the map offered no indication of where they were. The landscape felt foreign, otherworldly. Orlo flew just ahead, his massive wings almost soundless as they cut through the air. He would glance back from time to time, his yellow eyes scanning the surroundings with a wary sharpness. Ella knew the forest had its dangers, but so far they had managed to avoid them. She could feel the magic in the air, humming just beneath the surface, watching them. She wondered if the forest itself was testing her. They soon came to a clearing where the trees pulled back, revealing a wide chasm that seemed to stretch endlessly on both sides. The ground dropped off sharply into a dark void below. Ella peered over the edge, but there was no sign of the bottom. Only a swirling blackness that twisted like smoke. "Where do we go now?" Ella asked, frowning as she unfolded the map. But the map provided no help. The path simply led straight to the chasm and stopped. "Patience," Orlo murmured, his eyes narrowing as he looked ahead. In the centre of the chasm, something stirred. From the shadows themselves, a bridge began to form. Dark strands of smoke coiled and twisted, slowly weaving together into a narrow bridge that stretched from their side to the other. It shimmered like the surface of a mirror, but its edges flickered, as though it could vanish at any moment. "The Bridge of Shadows," Orlo said, his voice low, "a test as old as Valoria itself." Ella's stomach clenched as she stared at the fragile-looking bridge. "A test? How do we cross it?" "You don't cross it by force," Orlo said, landing beside her with a soft thud. "The bridge responds to those who seek Valoria. It will test your mind, not your strength." Ella swallowed, her heart pounding. She had heard of magical bridges in old stories, but never one made of shadows. What kind of test? "Riddles," Orlo said, his voice growing grave. "If you answer correctly, the bridge will hold, but if you fail—" His eyes flicked to the swirling void below. "The bridge will disappear and you will fall." A cold knot twisted in Ella's chest. The dark chasm beneath them seemed to shift as if it hungered for those who failed. She took a deep breath and looked at Orlo. "We can do this." Orlo nodded. "Remember, you must think clearly. The riddles are meant to confuse, to trick, but we will face them together." With no other choice, Ella stepped toward the edge of the bridge, her heart racing. The moment her foot touched the shadowy surface, a voice echoed through the air. It was deep and smooth, like a whisper carried on the wind. "I am not alive, but I grow. I do not have lungs, but I need air. What am I?" The riddle hung in the air, twisting through Ella's mind. She frowned, trying to focus. The words circled around her thoughts, teasing at their meaning. Not alive, but it grows. It needs air, but has no lungs. "Fire," she whispered suddenly, the answer lighting up in her mind. "The answer is fire." The bridge shimmered for a moment, and then it solidified beneath her feet, allowing her to take another step forward. "Good," Orlo said, his voice steady. "But the bridge will not be so easy from here on." They moved cautiously, each step causing the shadowy surface to ripple beneath them. Halfway across, the voice returned, this time sharper, more challenging. "I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with the wind. What am I?" Ella bit her lip, glancing at Orlo. The owl's eyes were focused, but he remained silent, letting her puzzle through the riddle on her own. "No mouth, no ears, but it speaks and it hears, alive with the wind." "An echo," she said, her voice firm. "It's an echo." The bridge pulsed again, its dark surface growing more solid as she stepped forward. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, but she knew there was still more ahead. As they neared the final stretch of the bridge, the voice returned for a third time. This riddle was colder, its tone almost mocking. "The more you take, the more you leave behind. What am I?" Ella's mind raced. "The more you take, the more you leave behind?" She frowned, struggling to make sense of it. Footsteps. It has to be footsteps. "The answer is footsteps," she said aloud. The shadows around the bridge shimmered, and at last the dark surface solidified beneath them completely, allowing them to step off onto the other side of the chasm. The Bridge of Shadows, defeated by riddles, dissolved back into the swirling darkness, as if it had never been there. Ella's legs trembled slightly from the tension, but she looked at Orlo, her face breaking into a relieved smile. "We did it." Orlo gave a solemn nod. "You did well. The forest does not test those who are unworthy, and you have proven yourself once again." He spread his wings, stretching them wide. "But remember, this is only the beginning. There are far greater challenges ahead. Ella nodded, though the weight of his words hung over her. The road to Valoria would not be easy, but with Orlo by her side and the promise of the lost kingdom ahead, she felt ready for whatever came next. The path stretched out before them, dark and mysterious, but her resolve had never been stronger. Together they stepped forward, leaving the chasm and the bridge of shadows behind. The forest became quieter as Ella and Orlo pressed onward, the air growing heavier, almost expectant. The trees were larger here, their roots twisting and intertwining like the veins of the earth itself. The light that filtered through the dense canopy above had a strange silvery quality, casting everything in a soft glow. Ella's steps slowed as the path began to change beneath her feet, the ground turning softer, almost like damp moss. After hours of walking, they heard it, a soft rhythmic sound like a distant sigh. It wasn't the wind, nor was it the rustling of leaves. It was something deeper, something alive. Orlo slowed his pace, his feathers ruffling as his sharp eyes scanned the horizon. "We're near," Orlo said, his voice quiet as if not to disturb the moment. "The river of dreams lies ahead." Ella felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She had heard of enchanted rivers in stories, but nothing like this. Her heart beat faster as they reached a break in the trees. There, stretching out before them, was the river. It was unlike anything Ella had ever seen. The water moved slowly, its surface smooth and glassy, but instead of reflecting the world around it, the river seemed to hold something more. Colours swirled within it, blues, greens and silvers, but every now and then shapes would appear, fleeting images that danced on the surface for only a moment before vanishing beneath the gentle waves. Faces, places, moments in time. Orlo stopped at the river's edge, his sharp talons curling into the soft earth. "This is no ordinary river," he said. "It carries the dreams of those who once sought Valoria, and those who ruled it. If you look closely, you can see the dreams they left behind." Ella stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. She crouched by the riverbank, her reflection barely visible on the shifting surface. The dreams flowed just beneath the water, like stories waiting to be told. She reached out, her fingertips grazing the surface, and suddenly the river stirred. Images rose to meet her, clearer now, as though the river recognized her touch. At first the images were soft, like distant memories. She saw children playing in golden fields, a grand castle that seemed to shine with an otherworldly light, and a kingdom filled with laughter. Valoria, it was beautiful, everything her grandmother had told her and more. The people in the visions smiled and danced, their lives filled with joy and magic. But then slowly, the dreams began to change. The colours darkened, the laughter fading into whispers. The once bright fields turned cold and grey, and shadows crept across the land. The castle, once grand, seemed to crumble before her eyes, its walls cracked and broken. And in the centre of it all, standing alone in the ruined halls, was a figure, tall and graceful, yet cloaked in sorrow. Ella's breath caught in her throat. The figure was a woman, her hair long and silver, her face pale but striking. She wore a crown, delicate and shimmering, but it seemed to weigh heavily on her head. The woman's eyes were filled with a deep sadness, as though she had seen the fall of everything she once loved. "That is Queen Alara," Orlo said softly, his voice tinged with something close to regret. "The last queen of Valoria." Ella looked at Orlo, startled. What happened to her? Orlo's gaze was fixed on the river. She ruled Valoria in its final days, when the kingdom was at its most fragile. Valoria was a place of great magic, but with that magic came a curse, one that slowly poisoned the land. The more the kingdom thrived, the more it began to decay from within. Ella's heart ached as she watched the queen in the river's reflection. Couldn't she stop it? "She tried," Orlo said, his voice heavy with the weight of the story. "Queen Alara was a powerful ruler, wise beyond her years, but even she could not undo the curse that had taken hold of Valoria. She sought help from ancient forces, made sacrifices, but in the end it was not enough. The magic of the land turned on itself, and the kingdom began to fall apart." The river shifted again, showing flashes of Ilara's desperate attempts to save her people, her journeys through dark, enchanted forests, her dealings with mysterious creatures. And finally, her standing alone in the heart of the castle as it crumbled around her. "What happened to her?" Ella whispered, her voice barely audible. "No one knows for sure," Orlo replied. "Some say she vanished, swallowed by the magic that had once sustained her. Others believe she still wanders the forest, lost to the very curse she sought to break. But her dreams remain here in the river, trapped in this place between time." Ella's chest tightened as she watched Queen Alara's sorrowful gaze linger in the water. It was as if the queen was searching for something, or someone. She could feel the weight of Alara's struggle, the endless battle to save her kingdom, only to be consumed by the very thing she loved. "Valoria needs more than to be found," Ella murmured. "It needs to be restored." Orlo turned his gaze to her, his yellow eyes filled with a kind of quiet understanding. "That is why you are here, Ella, to finish what was started. The forest has chosen you because you carry the hope that was lost long ago." Ella looked down at the river once more. The images had faded, the dreams sinking back into the swirling depths. But the weight of what she had seen stayed with her. Queen Alara, the forgotten kingdom, the curse that still lingered in the air. It was all real. With a deep breath, Ella stood, the resolve in her chest hardening like steel. "I won't let Valoria be forgotten," she said, her voice firm. "I'll find it, and I'll help restore it. For Queen Alara, for the kingdom." Orlo spread his wings, his great form casting a shadow over the river. "Then we must keep moving. The river has shown you the past, but the future lies ahead. The path to Valoria is not yet complete." Together they turned from the river of dreams and pressed on, the weight of Valoria's history and the fate of its last queen heavy in their hearts. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the stranger the air became. The trees grew thicker, their branches intertwining so closely that the sunlight barely broke through. The forest floor was soft beneath Ella's feet, a blanket of moss and fallen leaves that muffled every step. The path on the map had become harder to follow, winding through narrow clearings and overgrown trails that seemed determined to lead them astray. But Ella's resolve was unwavering. The memory of the River of Dreams stayed with her, the image of Queen Alara etched into her mind. Beside her, Orlo glided silently, his wings nearly brushing the tops of the trees. He hadn't spoken much since they left the river, his eyes scanning the forest with a quiet vigilance that made Ella uneasy. The further they went, the more the forest seemed to change. The air grew colder, carrying a strange, still quality that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. Suddenly the trees parted, revealing an open space ahead. Ella stopped in her tracks. There, in the middle of the forest, was a village. But it was like no village Ella had ever seen. The houses were small, made of stone and wood, with thick moss covering the roofs. Cobblestone paths wound between them, but everything was perfectly still. The air was thick with a silence that seemed unnatural, as if the world itself had paused. No wind stirred the leaves, no birds called from the trees. It was as though time had frozen. Ella stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Orlo landed beside her, his sharp talons scratching the ground as he folded his wings. "This," he said quietly, "is what remains of Valoria." Ella's eyes widened in shock. "Valoria?" She looked around, taking in the empty houses, the abandoned streets. "But there's no one here." "No," Orlo replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. "There hasn't been for a long time." Ella walked further into the village, her heart pounding in her chest. The houses looked as if they had been left in a hurry, doors left ajar, windows open. But there was no sign of struggle, no indication of what had happened. It was as if the people had simply disappeared, leaving the village to stand, untouched by time. "They didn't just vanish, did they?" Ella asked, her voice trembling slightly. Orlo's eyes, filled with a strange sadness, followed her movements. "No, they are still here in a way." Ella turned to him confused. "What do you mean?" Orlo's wings rustled softly as he shifted his weight. This village was once part of Valoria before the curse took hold. When the magic of the kingdom began to turn dark, it spread across the land, touching everything in its path. The people of this village were caught in the heart of it. They were trapped, frozen in time by the curse that now holds them. Ella's stomach twisted. She looked around the village again, this time with a new understanding. The stillness wasn't just eerie, it was wrong. The village was stuck, suspended in some sort of magical limbo. And the people? "They're trapped," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like this, forever." Orlo nodded slowly. "Yes, they are neither alive nor dead. The curse binds them to this place, leaving them to exist in the spaces between time. They cannot leave, and they cannot be freed, not unless the curse is broken." Ella's heart ached as she imagined the villagers frozen in their lives, waiting endlessly for a freedom that might never come. How could this happen? "The curse that Queen Alara fought against did more than just destroy the kingdom," Orlo said, his voice low and sorrowful. "It took the people, their homes, their lives, and twisted them. The magic that once brought life to Valoria now keeps it frozen, as if mocking what it once was." Ella turned slowly, taking in the empty streets, the motionless houses. She could almost hear the echo of lives once lived here, the laughter of children, the voices of families, the hum of daily life. But all of that was gone now, replaced by an unnatural silence that weighed on her chest like a stone. "Is there any way to free them?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "There is only one way," Orlo said. "To break the curse of Valoria, but that is no easy task, Ella. The curse is old and its roots run deep. The forest itself is bound by it. Even if we find the heart of the kingdom, breaking the curse will take more than just will. It will take sacrifice." Ella swallowed hard. The enormity of what she had set out to do was beginning to settle in. This wasn't just about finding a lost kingdom. It was about saving an entire world frozen in time, trapped by a curse that had already claimed so many. But she couldn't turn back now. She had made a promise, not just to herself, but to Valoria, to Queen Alara, and now to these people. She would see this through. She stepped closer to one of the houses, her hand brushing the cold stone. "We can't leave them like this," she whispered. "No," Orlo agreed, "but you must be prepared for what lies ahead. The forest will not give up its secrets easily, and the curse will fight to remain." "I don't care," Ella said, her voice stronger now. "I'll do whatever it takes." Orlo regarded her for a long moment, his eyes filled with a quiet respect. "Then we move forward. But be warned, Ella. What lies ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Ella nodded, though her heart beat faster at his words. She took one last look at the silent village, the empty houses standing like sentinels in the quiet. She made a silent promise to the people trapped here. She would find a way to break the curse. She would free them. With that, she and Orlo turned away from the frozen village and continued deeper into the forest, the shadows growing longer as they ventured further into the heart of the cursed kingdom. The silence of the village lingered behind them, but Ella carried the weight of it with her, her determination burning brighter with each step. The path to Valoria was growing darker, but she would not stop until the curse was broken and the kingdom restored. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the darker the world around them became. The trees were thicker now, their branches gnarled and twisted like old hands reaching toward the sky. The air had grown colder, and with each step the weight of the curse seemed to press down on Ella's chest. Even Orlo, usually calm and composed, moved with a tense vigilance, his eyes scanning the shadows for unseen dangers. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the silent village. The memory of the frozen homes, the trapped people, weighed heavily on Ella's mind. Each step felt like a step closer to something bigger, something darker, and yet she pressed on, her resolve stronger than ever. After what felt like hours, they came upon a clearing. It was different from the others they had passed. A wide, open space bathed in an eerie light that seemed to come from nowhere. In the centre of the clearing stood a figure, tall and still, casting a long shadow over the ground. As they drew closer, Ella's breath caught in her throat. It was a statue, but not just any statue. The figure was a woman carved from stone, her features delicate and regal. Her hair, once flowing and beautiful, had been captured in the stone as though it still moved in the wind. She wore a crown upon her head, and her face, though frozen in time, carried the weight of 1,000 sorrows. Her hands were outstretched, as if reaching for something just beyond her grasp. Ella's heart ached as she realised who this must be. Queen Alara, Orlo said softly, landing beside her. His eyes, usually sharp and unyielding, were filled with a quiet sadness. Ella stepped closer, the coldness of the stone sending a chill through her body. She had seen the Queen's sorrow in the River of Dreams, but this was different. Seeing her like this, trapped, turned to stone, made the curse feel more real than ever. She's been turned to stone, Ella whispered, her voice breaking. How could this happen? Orlo ruffled his feathers, his gaze fixed on the statue. This is the curse's final punishment, he said quietly. When Queen Alara could not break the curse, it claimed her as well. She was the last hope of Valoria, and when she fell, the kingdom was lost. Ella's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the Queen's stone face. The sorrow in her expression was so clear, even frozen in time. She had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, only to be trapped like this, her kingdom crumbling around her. Without thinking, Ella reached out, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the Queen's hand. The moment she touched the stone, a soft whisper filled the air like the rustling of leaves in the wind. Who is there? Ella gasped and stepped back, her heart racing. The voice was faint, barely more than a breath, but it was unmistakable. It was the voice of Queen Alara. Orlo's eyes widened and he flapped his wings in surprise. It's her, he whispered. The Queen's spirit still lingers. Ella's pulse quickened as the whisper returned, stronger now, swirling around them like a breeze that carried the weight of centuries. Who dares touch the cursed Queen? Speak, for I have waited long in this silence. Ella swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she spoke. My name is Ella. I've come to find Valoria. I want to help break the curse. There was a long pause, and then the wind seemed to shift, the voice coming from all around them, gentle but filled with an ancient pain. You seek to break what cannot be broken, the Queen whispered. Valoria is lost, its people are lost, and I am but a memory, trapped in stone by the darkness I could not defeat. Ella's heart ached at the sound of her voice. But there must be a way. The curse. It doesn't have to last forever. I've come this far. I've seen what it's done to the people, to you. Please tell me how I can help. For a moment there was only silence. The wind stilled and the air around them grew heavy with tension. Then slowly, the whispers returned, softer now, like a secret shared between friends. The curse is powerful, the Queen said. It is rooted in the very magic of Valoria. To break it, only a heart pure enough to withstand its weight can undo what has been done. Ella's brow furrowed. A pure heart, what does that mean? Orlo stepped forward, his voice low. It means the curse can only be broken by someone whose intentions are selfless, someone who is willing to give up everything for the kingdom. Ella felt a lump form in her throat. She looked at the statue, at the Queen's sorrowful face, and felt the weight of her words, a pure heart. She had come here because of her curiosity, because of her love for the stories her grandmother told her. But now, standing in front of Queen Alara, she realized this was about more than finding a lost kingdom. This was about saving an entire people who had been trapped, just like the Queen. Your heart is strong, child, the Queen whispered, her voice fading slightly. But the path ahead is dark. The curse will test you. It will tempt you with fear, with power. You must be willing to sacrifice everything if you wish to restore what has been lost. Ella's heart raced. She had known from the start that this journey wouldn't be easy, but now, hearing the Queen's words, she understood the true weight of the task before her. It wasn't just about finding Valoria, it was about saving it no matter the cost. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. I'll do whatever it takes. There was a long pause, and for a moment Ella thought the Queen had gone silent again, but then the wind picked up, swirling around them in a soft, gentle breeze. Then go, Ella, the Queen whispered. Find the heart of the kingdom. There you will face the final test. If you are truly pure of heart, the curse will break and Valoria will be restored. The wind began to die down and Ella felt the whispers fade into the air, the Queen's voice growing fainter with each passing second. Do not lose yourself to the darkness, for only the light within can break the curse. And then silence. Ella stood frozen for a moment, her hand still hovering over the statue. The Queen's words echoed in her mind, filling her with both hope and fear. The heart of the kingdom, the final test. Orlo stepped closer, his voice low. "The Queen has given us the key. We must find the heart of Valoria." Ella nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. She turned from the statue, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. The forest seemed darker now, the weight of the curse pressing down on them with every step, but Ella knew what she had to do. Together, she and Orlo ventured deeper into the cursed forest, the whispers of the Queen still lingering in the air, guiding them toward the heart of the kingdom and towards their final test. The forest's grip tightened as Ella and Orlo ventured further into the unknown. The trees were gnarled and twisted, their roots snaking across the ground like dark tendrils reaching for anything that dared come near. A thick mist clung to the air, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. But Ella pressed on, the words of Queen Elara etched in her mind. The heart of Valoria. It was more than a magical gem. It was the key to breaking the curse, to freeing the people of the Silent Village and restoring the kingdom. But to reach it, they would have to face a danger greater than any they had encountered so far. A dragon, according to the old legends. Orlo had been silent since they left the clearing, his wings rustling uneasily as they neared the cave where the heart was said to be hidden. "We're close," Orlo said at last, his voice barely more than a murmur. His sharp eyes scanned the mist ahead, wary of what lay beyond. "I can feel the magic in the air. The heart of Valoria is near." Ella's grip on the map tightened as they stepped into a small, rocky clearing. At the far end, nestled between two jagged cliffs, was the mouth of a dark cave. The entrance was wide and foreboding, the stone around it charred as if scorched by fire. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and something ancient, something alive. "This is it," Ella whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the pulse of magic, faint but undeniable, coming from deep within the cave. Orlo landed beside her, his feathers ruffled. "We must be cautious," he warned. "The dragon will not give up the heart easily." Ella nodded, swallowing the lump of fear that had lodged in her throat. She had known this moment would come, but now, standing before the cave, the weight of what they were about to face pressed down on her. But she had come too far to turn back. The people of Valoria were counting on her. Queen Elara was counting on her. With a deep breath, Ella stepped forward, her feet crunching against the gravel as she made her way toward the cave's entrance. The darkness seemed to swallow them as they entered, the air growing colder with each step. The sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere deep within, and the walls of the cave glistened with moisture. Every shadow felt like it was watching them, waiting for them to slip. They had barely entered when a low, rumbling growl filled the air, vibrating through the stone beneath their feet. Ella froze, her breath catching in her throat. The sound came from deep within the cave, a primal noise that sent a shiver down her spine. Orlo's wings tensed and his voice dropped to a whisper. "The dragon is awake." The growl grew louder and Ella's heart pounded in her ears as they moved deeper into the cave. The tunnel twisted and turned, the path narrowing until they finally emerged into a massive cavern. In the center of the room, resting on a pile of broken stone and shattered treasures, was the dragon. It was enormous, larger than anything Ella had ever imagined. Its scales gleamed in the dim light, a dark, almost metallic sheen that rippled with every breath it took. Its wings were folded against its body, but even tucked in they looked powerful enough to block out the sky. Smoke curled from its nostrils as it slept, a faint glow of fire flickering in the depths of its throat. And there, resting on a pedestal in the middle of the cavern, was the heart of Valoria. The gem was unlike anything Ella had ever seen. It pulsed with a soft blue light like a heartbeat, casting a faint glow over the cavern walls. The magic radiating from it was almost tangible, filling the air with a hum that made the hair on Ella's arms stand on end. Orlo moved closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "The heart. It's more powerful than I thought." Ella nodded, her eyes fixed on the glowing gem, but her gaze quickly shifted back to the dragon. It stirred, its massive tail twitching as it let out another deep growl in its sleep. If they woke it, there would be no chance of retrieving the heart. "We have to be careful," Ella whispered. "We can't wake it." Orlo's wings fluttered nervously, but he nodded. Move slowly. The dragon is ancient, but its senses are sharp. Even the smallest sound could wake it. Ella moved cautiously, her steps light as she crept toward the heart. The cavern was littered with broken treasures, old coins, shattered swords, and pieces of armor from those who had likely tried and failed before her. The dragon's breath rumbled in the background, steady but threatening, like a storm waiting to unleash its fury. She was nearly to the pedestal when a loud clatter echoed through the cavern. Ella's foot had knocked over a piece of broken armor, sending it skidding across the stone floor. Her heart stopped. The dragon's eyes snapped open, glowing a fiery orange in the dim light. "Run!" Orlo screeched, launching himself into the air as the dragon rose to its full height, smoke pouring from its nostrils. Ella sprinted toward the heart, her mind racing. The dragon let out a deafening roar, its wings spreading wide as it shook the cavern, sending rocks tumbling from the ceiling. The pedestal was just ahead, the heart glowing brighter with each second, but the dragon was closing in fast. With a final burst of speed, Ella reached the pedestal and grabbed the heart. The moment her fingers touched the gem, a shock of cold magic surged through her, making her gasp. The gem pulsed with energy, and for a moment everything around her seemed to slow. The dragon roared again, its massive body looming over her, fire flickering in its throat. "Ella, now!" Orlo called from above, his voice filled with urgency. Without thinking, Ella turned and sprinted back toward the entrance, clutching the heart of Valoria tightly against her chest. The dragon's fiery breath chased her, lighting up the cavern in an explosion of heat and flame. Rocks fell around her as the cave trembled, but Ella kept running, her feet pounding against the stone floor. Orlo swooped down, grabbing her by the shoulders with his talons, and lifted her just as the dragon's claws smashed into the ground where she had been standing. They soared out of the cave, the roar of the dragon echoing behind them as they burst into the cold, misty air of the forest. Orlo carried her just beyond the clearing before gently lowering her back to the ground. Both of them were breathless, the adrenaline of the chase still pulsing through their veins. Ella collapsed onto the ground, clutching the heart of Valoria in her hands. The gem pulsed softly, its light gentle and calming now. They had done it. They had retrieved the heart. Orlo landed beside her, his feathers ruffled and his breathing heavy. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with relief. "You found the heart of Valoria." Ella looked down at the glowing gem in her hands, the weight of their victory finally settling in. The curse could be broken. Valoria could be restored. But she knew the hardest part was still to come. The final test awaited them. Ella's hands trembled as she cradled the heart of Valoria, its soft blue glow pulsing like a steady heartbeat. The weight of the task ahead settled heavily on her, but she stood tall, the resolve in her chest firm. Orlo perched beside her, his feathers still ruffled from their escape, but his sharp eyes glinted with pride and caution. They had the heart, but now came the most important part, breaking the curse. The path back to the Queen's clearing felt shorter this time, though the shadows of the forest seemed to close in tighter, as if the very land was waiting for what would come next. The air was thick with tension, the magic of the forest humming like a string pulled too tight. It knew something was changing, and for the first time Ella felt like she could feel the forest watching her, waiting. When they reached the clearing, the statue of Queen Alara stood as it had before, tall and silent in the centre. The mist swirled gently around the Queen's stone form, and the weight of her sorrow seemed to hang even heavier in the air. Ella approached the statue slowly, her heart beating in time with the pulse of the heart of Valoria in her hands. She could feel the magic coursing through the gem, powerful and alive, as if the very essence of the kingdom was waiting to be released. "Ella," Orlo said softly, landing beside her, "you have the heart. The curse can be broken now, but remember, this is no ordinary task. The power of the heart can free Valoria, but it will require great strength from you." Ella nodded, her eyes fixed on the Queen's stone face. She could almost hear the whispers from before, Queen Alara's voice filled with the weight of centuries of longing. The Queen had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and now it was Ella's turn to finish what the Queen had started. Taking a deep breath, Ella stepped closer to the statue, The heart of Valoria pulsed brighter in her hands, its glow casting long shadows over the clearing. She hesitated for only a moment before pressing the gem against the cold stone of the Queen's chest. The moment the heart touched the statue, a surge of magic erupted from the gem, flooding the clearing with blinding light. Ella gasped as the force of it knocked her back, but she kept her grip on the heart, holding it steady against the Queen. The wind began to swirl violently around them, the mist rising into a whirlwind of light and shadow. The statue of Queen Alara seemed to hum, vibrating with the energy of the heart, and slowly, painfully, the stone began to crack. Ella's heart raced as she watched the cracks spread across the Queen's form, thin lines of blue light seeping through the stone. The whispers in the air grew louder, a chorus of voices that echoed through the clearing, as if the very soul of Valoria was awakening. Orlo hovered nearby, his wings spread wide as he watched the magic unfold, his eyes sharp but filled with hope. As the cracks widened, the stone began to fall away piece by piece, revealing soft, pale skin beneath. The Queen's face, once frozen in sorrow, now softened as the last of the stone crumbled away, revealing Queen Alara in her full regal form. Ella held her breath as the Queen's eyes fluttered open. They were a deep, shimmering blue, filled with the weight of centuries, but also with something else: hope. The heart of Valoria, now glowing brighter than ever, pulsed in Ella's hands, and she felt the magic course through her. It was like the very essence of the kingdom was flowing through her veins, connecting her to the land, to the people, to the Queen. The curse that had bound Valoria for so long was breaking, shattering like glass beneath the weight of the heart's power. Queen Alara's voice, soft but strong, filled the clearing. "Ella!" Ella blinked, tears filling her eyes as she stared at the Queen, alive and free before her. "Your Majesty." The Queen smiled, a soft, grateful smile that spoke of endless gratitude. "You have done what I could not. You have freed Valoria." The wind around them calmed, the magic settling like a gentle sigh. Ella stepped back as Queen Alara rose to her full height, her gown shimmering with the light of the heart. The Queen turned toward the forest, her eyes bright with determination and relief. "The curse has held Valoria for too long," Queen Alara said, her voice steady. "But now it is over." As the Queen spoke, the ground beneath them began to shift. The trees, once twisted and gnarled, seemed to straighten, their bark glowing with new life. The mist that had hung over the forest for so long began to lift, revealing a sky that was clear and bright, filled with the golden light of the sun. And then slowly they heard it, the sound of life returning to the silent village. The air filled with the soft murmur of voices, the creak of doors opening, and the distant laughter of children. Ella's heart soared as she realized what was happening. The people, the ones who had been trapped by the curse, were awakening. "We did it," Ella whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They're free." Orlo landed beside her, his feathers ruffled with excitement. "Valoria is alive once more." Queen Alara turned to Ella, her eyes soft but filled with the wisdom of centuries. "You have restored what was lost," she said. "Valoria owes you its life." Ella shook her head, her eyes still wide with wonder. "I didn't do this alone. You and Orlo, the people of Valoria, it was all of us." The Queen smiled, a warm, motherly smile that seemed to erase the last remnants of sorrow from her face. "But it was your heart, Ella, your pure, selfless heart that brought Valoria back." Ella looked down at the heart of Valoria in her hands, its glow fading now that the curse had been lifted. The weight of the gem felt lighter, as if it had fulfilled its purpose. Queen Alara reached out and gently touched the heart, her fingers brushing Ella's. "This kingdom will thrive once more because of you." Ella smiled, her chest filled with a warmth she had never felt before. She had done it. Valoria was free, the Queen was free, and the curse was broken. Together, Ella, Orlo, and Queen Alara stood in the clearing, watching as the forest came back to life, as the kingdom of Valoria, once lost to time and darkness, began to bloom again. Valoria had been restored, and its future, bright and untarnished, was just beginning. The days that followed felt like a dream. Valoria, once shrouded in darkness and sorrow, was now alive with the sounds of laughter and joy. The forest, which had once felt heavy with the curse's weight, now hummed with life. Trees stood tall and proud, their leaves vibrant with colour, and the air was filled with the songs of birds and the rustle of wind through the branches. The village, once frozen in time, was now bustling with people. Families reunited, children playing in the streets, and the old telling stories of a time before the curse. Ella walked through the village, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the people of Valoria rebuild their lives. They smiled at her as she passed, their eyes filled with gratitude and awe. She had freed them, but it didn't feel like her victory alone. It was the victory of the kingdom, of the people who had endured so much and now had a chance to live again. Orlo perched beside her, his wings tucked neatly at his sides as he surveyed the village with quiet satisfaction. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said, his voice soft. Ella nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "It is," she said, "more beautiful than I ever imagined." As they walked, they reached the heart of the village, where the newly restored castle stood tall and gleaming, its once crumbling towers now strong and proud. Queen Alara waited for them at the entrance, her regal figure framed by the castle's grand doors. She smiled warmly as Ella approached, her blue eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. "Ella," the Queen said, her voice gentle but strong, "you have done more for this kingdom than anyone could have ever asked. You have restored Valoria to its former glory." Ella blushed, ducking her head slightly. "It wasn't just me," she said. "Valoria was always meant to come back. I just helped it find its way." The Queen stepped forward, her gaze softening as she reached out and gently lifted Ella's chin. "You did more than that," she said. "You brought hope when there was none. You showed courage when others would have turned back. For that, this kingdom owes you a debt that cannot be repaid." Ella's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she smiled. She had done what she set out to do. Valoria was free, the curse broken. The people were safe, and Queen Alara was back where she belonged. There was no greater reward than that. But the Queen wasn't finished. She stepped back, her expression growing more serious. "Ella, there is something I must ask of you," she said. Ella's heart skipped a beat, her stomach twisting with uncertainty. "What is it?" Queen Alara took a deep breath, her eyes locking with Ella's. "Valoria needs a new queen. I have ruled for centuries, and though I am grateful to be free of the curse, my time is done. This kingdom needs new leadership, someone with a pure heart and a vision for the future, someone like you." Ella's eyes widened in shock. "Me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Queen nodded. "You have proven yourself more than worthy. You possess the heart, the courage, and the wisdom that this kingdom needs. The people of Valoria trust you, and I can think of no better ruler to guide them into this new era." For a moment, Ella was speechless. The thought of becoming queen had never crossed her mind. She had come to Valoria to break the curse, to help the people, nothing more. The idea of ruling, of wearing the crown, felt foreign to her, like a weight she hadn't asked to bear. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her mind racing. Orlo, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "Ella," he said gently, "you have a choice, but know that whatever you decide, Valoria will flourish because of what you have already done." Ella looked between Orlo and the Queen, her heart heavy with the decision before her. She knew what being queen would mean, a life of responsibility, of leading a kingdom that would always look to her for guidance. It was an honor, a role that came with great power. But deep down, Ella knew that her journey was not about power or ruling. She had come to Valoria because she believed in its people, in the stories her grandmother had told her. She had come because she wanted to help, and now, with the kingdom restored, her part in its story felt complete. With a deep breath, Ella met Queen Alara's gaze, her voice steady but kind. "I'm honored, truly," she said, "but I don't think I'm meant to be queen. Valoria is where it belongs now, with its people and with you." The Queen's eyes softened with understanding. "You are wise, Ella," she said, "and your humility is a gift. If this is your choice, I will respect it." Ella smiled, her heart lighter now that the decision was made. "It is," she said softly. "I want to return home. My village needs me and I need to be there, but I will never forget what we've done here." Queen Alara nodded, a proud smile on her face. "You will always be welcome in Valoria," she said, "and you will always be remembered as the one who saved us." Orlo fluttered to Ella's side, his wings rustling with quiet approval. "Ready?" he asked, his voice warm. Ella nodded. "Yes," she said, glancing one last time at the vibrant village, the gleaming castle, and the people who now thrived in the kingdom's new light. Her heart swelled with pride, but also with peace. She had done what she set out to do. Valoria was free, and her part in its story was complete. With a final farewell to the Queen and the people of Valoria, Ella and Orlo turned and made their way back through the forest. The trees no longer loomed with darkness. Instead, they whispered with life, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The path home felt lighter, brighter, as if the forest itself was guiding them with a soft, grateful touch. As they reached the edge of the forest, where Ella's village awaited, she looked back one last time. Valoria was no longer just a legend, no longer lost in the shadows of time. It was real, alive, and thriving. And as Ella stepped into the warm light of her home, she knew that the kingdom's new beginning was only just starting.